Ringo wasn't the best drummer in Liverpool.
Yes.
He wasn't even the best drummer in the Beatles. That's attributed to John Lennon. It was said by a comedian in 1982, 2 years after John had already passed away. So history is very slippery and very tricky. And we're going to start with Sarah, who's going to talk about how John was perceived in those seminal years in the 1960s. And we're going to watch how it begins to progress as we go through the years.
All right, so I'm going to talk about John in the 60s, and I'm going to really focus on how the American fans perceived John, because that's what I researched for my book about the American fan clubs. So the first look of John is that he's the married guy. So he's, everyone saw on the Ed Sullivan show, sorry girls, he's married. And so he automatically became the devoted family man in the eyes of the fans, which was very sweet. They loved Cynthia, she was a sweetheart. He was a little boy, he was a daddy. He was off limits to the girls because he was a married man, but they still liked his songs, they thought he was handsome, and they admired him as a musician. And then we go into A Hard Day's Night and the writing of his first book. And then he became the intellectual Beatle, that everyone saw him as the smart one, the witty, funny one that would make the wisecracks during all of the wonderful press conferences. And he still was the devoted family man. His pictures of him and Cynthia would be published. And that was really the early 60s, how he was perceived by all of the fans. He was kind of known for being more outspoken than the others, but he always had a funny little quip that went along with it. Everyone just saw him as, well, that's John, he's funny, he's smart, he's witty, and everyone just, he's the leader of the Beatles, is basically it. And then we hit 1966, and John makes a statement to Maureen Cleave about the Beatles being more popular than Jesus, and that's our first look of John Lennon as a sinner. Comes around. What is interesting is that I just published on my site just a few days ago on Meet the Beatles for Real, an article that was written by a woman that was republished in Daybook magazine, so this is going to sound very familiar. It was first published in England and was republished over the summer of '65. And Ringo goes into a long paragraph about how the Beatles, especially him personally, do not believe in God, they're agnostic. He's really not sure about how he thinks about God. I mean, it was very religious. Nobody jumped on that. Nobody said anything. But as soon as it was John, then it was a little different. So the Beatle fans, like the hardcore people that loved the Beatles anyway, a lot of them disagreed with John and said, I don't agree with this. I'm a Christian believer, but I do believe in John's right to freedom of speech, and I admire him for saying what he believes. That's what the research that I found, that the people who were the real fans, that's how they saw him. Like, he has the right to say what he wants, even though we disagree with it, that's okay, we still admire him, we still like him. However, the press didn't necessarily feel that way, and they really pushed the Beatle burnings and all of making him be like he's anti-religion, he's a bad person, look at the terrible things he said, he thinks that the Beatles are better than Jesus, and which of course took his quote and reconstrued it, but in the end, while people still hung on to that for a while, it was easier. Once he apologized, people kind of moved forward, and he was back to kind of, well, he's the guy that speaks his mind, he's outspoken. They would, as Jude said, would miscredit